COVID-19 is in our communities and the number of cases is on the rise. So it's essential that we each play our part in full by following all of the government guidance. Only by doing this can we keep our schools and businesses open. If you're young and healthy, you may feel the virus isn't a threat to you. But someone more vulnerable to coronavirus than you, perhaps someone closer to you than you realise, is depending on you to play your part in breaking the chain of transmission. So I'm asking everyone to do their bit. Stick to the rule of 6 for gatherings indoors or outdoors. Wash your hands thoroughly and regularly. Wear a face covering in enclosed spaces. Observe social distancing of 2 metres or 1 metre plus precautions where 2 metres really isn't possible. Follow all of the guidelines about car sharing. If you have symptoms, self-isolate and get a free test immediately. If we work together on this, we can control the spread of the virus. Thank you.
The 3 words I'd use to describe my role is team, rewarding and challenging.
Positive, team, supportive.
3 words I'd use to describe this job: gratifying, inspirational, challenging. Before this, I was a hairdresser, but I wanted to do more than make people feel good. I wanted to help change their lives. I'm now part of a team that does exactly that every day.
I spend my days talking to the residents of Nottinghamshire, their families and the support services that help them on a day-to-day basis. We're the front door to adult social care in Nottinghamshire, and we're responsible for taking the time to build a picture through talking with our residents about how they lead their lives, the things that they find difficult, the things that they can do, and also looking at how they wish to fulfil their lives to the best of their possibilities. In the 5 years of working here, I've learnt so much, particularly about social care. I had no previous experience in it, but through a really good training and induction plan, I was given all of the skills and information that I needed to be able to do my job. I've also been able to grow personally and within my career since then through a personally tailored plan of support and training to keep me going.
We're a really close-knit team and we thrive off helping the community of Nottinghamshire to live a valued and independent lifestyle. Every day is different and there's always new things to learn, which makes the role interesting and really exciting. At the end of the day, knowing that I've helped a number of people to have a better quality of life makes every day worthwhile.
COVID-19 is in our communities and the number of cases is on the rise. So it's essential that we each play our part in full by following all of the government guidance. Only by doing this can we keep our schools and businesses open. If you're young and healthy, you may feel the virus isn't a threat to you. But someone more vulnerable to coronavirus than you, perhaps someone closer to you than you realise, is depending on you to play your part in breaking the chain of transmission. So I'm asking everyone to do their bit. Stick to the rule of 6 for gatherings indoors or outdoors. Wash your hands thoroughly and regularly. Wear a face covering in enclosed spaces. Observe social distancing of 2 metres or 1 metre plus precautions where 2 metres really isn't possible. Follow all of the guidelines about car sharing. If you have symptoms, self-isolate and get a free test immediately. If we work together on this, we can control the spread of the virus. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Personnel Committee. If you're watching on a recording or live stream from Mars, then this is Wednesday the 16th of September at 2:30 in the afternoon. But this is the Personnel Committee for Nottinghamshire County Council. My name is Councillor Neil Clark. I'm the chairman of the committee, and also present on the committee today, Vice Chairman Councillor Keith Walker, and then we have Councillor Errol Henry, Councillor John Longdon, Councillor Sheila Place, Councillor Helen Ann Smith, Councillor Wallace, Councillor Gordon Wheeler, and Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, and Councillor Yvonne Woodhead. If you're not talking at the moment, I could ask you just to put yourself on mute. There's some funny bashes and bangings going on in the background somewhere. So if you could just stay on mute unless you are speaking, please. So in terms of officers, we have the Service Director for Customers, Governance and Employees, Marge Toward, Head of Human Resources, Jill Elder, the Group Manager for Business Support Centre, Sarah Stevenson. And I'm also pleased to welcome trade union representatives, Karen Eddy, James Minto, Adrian Morgan and Cheryl Pigeon. And finally, last but not least, Sarah Ashton is the clerk to the meeting. So welcome everybody. I intend trying to use the raised hand facility most of the time, but I am conscious that I think there are one or two members who possibly have mobile devices or haven't got the raised hand facility. So if you could just wave or make yourself known, and I will make sure that I ask you to speak when appropriate. Right, okay, without further ado, let's go on to the first item, which is the minutes of the last meeting on the 8th of July. Has everybody approved those as a correct record? I'll just I'll take silence or non-approval. If nobody's against, then I'll assume that everybody's in favour. Okay, item 2, apologies for absence. Sarah?
Okay, we've just received the one apologies for absence. That's from Councillor Maureen Dobson.
Great. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody, members or officers, have any, first of all, disclosable pecuniary interests? Take silence as no. And again, does anybody have any private interests, whether they're pecuniary or non-pecuniary? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So we're on to the first substantive item then, item 4, which relates to the workforce availability and support to maintain employee health and well-being. So could I ask Jill, please, could you introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, elected members and trade union colleagues. The purpose of this report is to further inform members of workforce availability, to update on performance around sickness absence, and to seek approval for the refreshed actions contained in the updated Employee Health and Wellbeing Action Plan. Members will recall from the previous 2 reports on this issue of a revised approach in terms of looking at the percentage of the workforce available to us. So not just looking at the figures around sickness absence, but having a more holistic view of who's in work, who's not in work, and doing some further analysis on the reasons for absence and the balance between short and longer term absence. And this report seeks to further expand on some of that. It still is worthy of note that over 50% of our directly employed workforce have had no days absence in the last 12 months, no days sickness absence, that is. We are still encouraging people to take annual leave as and when they require. The balance between short and long-term absence has also shifted over time and is now around 65% long-term, which is deemed 4 weeks or more, as opposed to 35% short-term. Now that shifts slightly over each quarter, but if we're looking at an approximation where that lands. And these two figures are important because they indicate where we would want to support management action to be focused. So if we've got 50% of the people taking no sickness absence, and then we've got a reducing amount of people taking short-term absence, we need to understand what it is that's tipping short-term absence over into the longer-term absence. And we do continue and have continued throughout the COVID situation to support managers managing their staff and their attendance. And that's demonstrated by the fact that there have been 5 dismissals over the last quarter for reasons of ill health capability. There's been 23 ill health retirements. And whilst we're still pleased to report that there's been no COVID-related deaths in the Nottinghamshire County Council workforce, there have sadly been 2 deaths in service in Q1. And we're already aware of 1 death in service in Q2 of a close colleague. So if we look at Q1's sickness absence performance, that's standing at 9.39 days. And you might say, well, I recall Jill saying last time that absence had improved during the COVID situation, and it has. Part of this is how we measure it. So you will recall we measure it on a 12-month rolling figure. If I look at Q1 average days per employee, it drops to 8.87 days. And if I extend Q1 through to the end of August, the figure further reduces to 7.9 days absence. So that is a significant reduction in average days. Now, it obviously remains to be seen what happens moving forward with local outbreaks of COVID-related absence, along with the increase in absence we sometimes see over the winter months. But that is a very positive thing to report in terms of reducing absence. And we spoke last time about exploring how flexible working had assisted with that. And also we spoke about people's renewed sense of pride in public service. We intend to continue engaging with our workforce to better understand how they're feeling about the current work situation and future world of work, so that informs decision making moving forward as part of our workforce recovery strategy and action plan. It still remains the case that mental health and stress related absence in the majority of departments is the most significant reason for absence, and we continue to try and enhance our offer in terms of support for people experiencing mental health issues. Over recent weeks, we've posted support for the World Suicide Prevention Day on the 10th of September. But also we're looking at physical well-being. So there's articles around knowing your numbers, which is about blood pressure and hypertension. There's a raft of information about the winter flu campaign. And I'm delighted to say, and Karen Eddy is here as the Unison representative, both Unison and GMB have agreed to support further our winter flu vaccination campaign as a mechanism of encouraging as many people as possible to get their vaccinations, either directly through the council for frontline workers, or indeed encouraging people to get vaccinated through their GPs. The other things we've done, we've had information around further homeworking top tips. We've refreshed domestic abuse helplines because sadly one of the known consequences of lockdown has been an increase in reports of domestic violence. We've promoted further bereavement training for health and social care professionals. We've raised awareness around the loneliness awareness campaign. And we've also reposted information to support people about managing their personal finances, because we're also aware that concerns about personal finance is a significant consequence of the pandemic situation. The report also tries to refresh on some of our commitments around disability confident, and it was pleasing that the leader made time to attend the Disabled Employees Support Network AGM, where she engaged in a Q&A session with the attendees there, which was very well received and was very insightful in terms of what that group of employees were concerned about, not just about their own working situation, but also that of the wider community. So I appreciate that we have previously hoped for greater contribution from public health colleagues in terms of research. Unfortunately, the capacity that had been identified has been seconded back to Public Health England. So the work around flexible working and the wider population health initiatives are on hold until a further colleague can be identified to undertake that piece of work. What we are increasingly exploring is how we can work more closely together, because I think it's really important that the campaigns that have a focus across all our communities are equally applicable to our own workforce, and therefore there will be joint working on the domestic abuse and violence, the winter flu vaccination campaign, and also the wider health initiatives around smoking cessation and obesity control. So I thought that is a very quick overview of the detailed information in the report. The recommendations are that members agree to the further work being progressed with public health colleagues in those areas just identified of winter flu, domestic abuse and health promotion campaigns. Also to agree to receive a further report in January 2021, which will provide further information on the reasons for the links between flexible working and reduced absence and workforce availability, because we will have more data from a further quarter experience, because it looks as if the situation will be continuing. And the third recommendation is to agree to receive a further report on the workforce's engagement and actions with recovery at November's committee. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So if we go to questions or comments, Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Jill. That's very comprehensive. But I was wondering what we're doing about workplace testing for COVID-19 for all our staff, whether they're in the council or at home or whatever workplace there is. What are we doing about local testing for us?
Jill?
My understanding is that testing has taken place in care homes. We're not doing universal testing for the workforce because a significant part of the workforce is working remotely at home. And we have detailed information on how people can access the tests available. Should the situation change, we will take the advice of public health colleagues and widen that offer, but that's what the current provision is for at the moment, Councillor Woodhead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair. Can I come back, Chairman, on that? Because I'm wondering about where our schools fit in with this. Because as we're seeing, more and more schools have got problems with COVID. And I think they're called bubbles, where they're being sent home. And in some cases, schools have closed. What are we doing for those staff, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
So schools have had the most comprehensive guidance provided by the County Council on the entire COVID situation. We've adopted a very similar approach to we have corporately, weekly meetings with trade union colleagues, teacher trade unions as well as our corporate trade unions, which have been invaluable to ensuring that people are properly engaged. If your question specifically about testing in schools, Councillor Woodhead, I don't have a direct answer for you on that, but I can certainly investigate and get back to you.
Okay, right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next is Councillor Henry.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you, Jill. This is a very good report. In fact, we're quite impressed with some elements within it, in particularly paragraph 6, 11, 12, and 13. Very good. So thank you. The only sort of clarification I seek is on point 11, where you talk about the winter flu vaccine. I'm assuming that this vaccine is offered to all employees and not a specific few. Just checking.
It's offered to frontline workers, Councillor Henry, via a voucher system.
So it's not offered to all, it's a group of specific staff that works in the front line only.
It is offered to frontline staff, bearing in mind that there are people with specific health conditions who are offered it via their GP surgeries anyway.
Okay, is that all right for Councillor Henry?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is what it is. I was just wondering because I knew there's other people that work at the council, so I thought we'd offer. Also, we only offer. They're getting feedback.
Yeah, the signal seems to be breaking up. Actually, we're catching sort of some of your words, but not all of them. But
so the impression I got from it was offered to all employees. That's all I'm saying. That's why I asked for the clarification. And obviously, you've made the point quite clear, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. One or two items, please, Jill. One of the things you said, and I fully support, about our employers can go and get the influenza vaccine. The one that you didn't mention was that you can go to your phone pharmacist. So you don't have to go into huge long queues in the GPs. You can go and get it done out there. That would be my first point. My second one, again relating to the influenza, we don't do that very well. I mean, last year we were only 75% of all those who could, in actual fact, have accessed it. Did, but there was a considerable number, I think, of 20%, 30%, who chose not to. How are we doing to approach those people to ensure that they are not helping, or not helping the virus, but not being part of the virus, given the fact that the COVID virus and influenza are very, very similar and put together are more lethal. So how are we working on that to get the numbers down? And that would be one that's public health needs to look at. My third question is, we have a lot of staff working from home. And the question is, how are we making sure that they have the right equipment to work at home?
Unknown participant is now exiting.
If you'd got a flat little ThinkPad pad, etc., and you were spending quite some time on the day working on it, it would probably crack someone's neck or make their arms ache, etc. Whereas if that was in this building, in County Hall building, we'd call on health welfare to come round and have a look and assess your workstation and give you whatever equipment you needed to be able to operate properly. So how are we checking that people are able to operate properly for their own health? And if not, what are we going to try and do for them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. You are quite right. Flu vaccinations are also available.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Pharmacies, and I'm certainly aware of a large local pharmacy who've leafleted households very recently, advising of their winter flu campaign and availability. in terms of encouraging more people to get vaccinated, the work from public health includes some myth busting. So a number of people think that if they have the vaccine, they're getting live vaccine and therefore will get symptoms. There is detailed information on the intranet which highlights that that is not the case and also answers a number of other questions that people may have. And it's another reason why I'm pleased that 2 of our major trade unions have come on board to support the campaign to get people vaccinated, because perish the thought they might not believe their manager or public health. They may feel more encouraged with the support of their trade union. So I think it's a multifaceted approach to try and encourage people to get vaccinated however they access their inoculation. And your third point was around home working and keeping people safe while working at home. There is a risk assessment for people working at home. There's a home working checklist. Yes, not everyone has exactly the same setup working at home as they do in the office. But when we were looking at reoccupying our buildings, there was something around service imperatives, but also individual need for coming back into offices, and that's been taken into account. So if somebody has a very specific need, like for a stand-up desk, and their home situation doesn't accommodate that, they will be prioritised to return to a building where it's safe for them to do so. But it is very much a risk-assessed process.
It's not a supplementary, it's more of just an observation. How are we letting our staff know, in both respects, both for the vaccinations, but also that if they have issues or problems over the workstations that they have at home, then they need to contact us? Not that it says goes round on a rumour mill, but we actually put out a positive statement saying, if you've got problems with this, come back and tell us.
The primary source of information on both these issues at the moment is on the intranet. Chief Executive has made a number of videos about reoccupying buildings and keeping people safe. If we felt it was helpful, we would ask him to include in one of his future videos. But one of the things on the intranet currently is a video clip of Jonathan Gribben, our Director of Public Health, advocating the importance of people getting their flu vaccinations and the reasons why it is so important.
Okay, right. All right, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if this is the right moment to say this, so if you will just indulge me for a few moments. But just before the meeting started, myself, Keith and Sarah Stevenson were chatting, and something came up that I thought would be good to bring up in this committee. Could we maybe, working with the adult social care team, work to produce a leaflet, a guidance brochure for members, well, for staff, family members or resident family members that have suffered a stroke, how they deal with it when that member comes home, and with a checklist of what sort of things they'd need in the home, because Sarah might want to say something on this herself, but she said she found it very difficult and it would have been handy if she'd have had that checklist. I'm not sure if it's something we can do through here, but I just wanted to flag it as, because that was a discussion we were having literally just as this meeting was starting, Chair. I don't know if that's something we can do with, like I say, with the adult social care team, but it would help staff and residents across the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know, Jill, have you any response to that, or is that something that we maybe take away and consider?
I think we'd always want to direct people to the National Stroke Association, but if there is more specific information required covering individual circumstances, then I'd be happy to raise that directly with colleagues in adult social care and health.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Yep, that's fine. Great. Okay. Don't have any other speakers that I can see, and so I would like to say I'm hoping that everybody is staying safe and well when I say in the workplace, or whether at home or wherever. And in view of Jill's comments about the absence or the sickness rates, then that's continued evidence, I think, that everybody is stepping up to the plate, and how hard everybody is working in these COVID times. So it's great to see. Right, so we have the recommendation, top of page 11, the 3 parts of the recommendation before us. I'll move that if somebody would like to second that, Councillor Walker. Yep, good, thank you. I don't think we need to go through the list, hopefully. It's probably easiest to ask, is anybody specifically against or abstaining? And if you don't indicate, I'm going to assume that everybody is in favour and we can pass that recommendation. I don't hear or see anybody against or abstaining, so I will take that as the motion is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to agenda item 5, which relates to the Cannock Council workforce profile. This is something that we need to publish so that our performance can be held to account. And Jill is going to be our star performer this meeting, because we're back to Jill again for this item. Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that this is an annual report. We've had a requirement to publish information since 2011 around our workforce profile in relation to protected characteristics. And this has enabled us over a period of time to develop some trend information. It is a detailed report. The appendices is a detailed report of what the workforce profile is like by gender, by ethnicity, by age, by disability, and there is some breaking down of it between the council as a whole and by departments. There is also a breakdown of turnover rates by protected characteristic, and also of applicants for jobs. And all this information, it's not a tick box exercise. We do use this information to inform a range of action plans and activity to try and make the workforce more representative of the communities that it serves. So we use information from the local labour market, the Office of National Statistics, and we do still use 2011 census information, but recognise that the world will have moved on significantly from the time of the last census. So in terms of things to note in the report, disclosure is always a challenge for us. So we automatically gather information on gender and on age, because that is information that's gathered at interview, at sort of application, apologies. What we ask people to self-declare is their ethnicity, their religion or belief, their sexual orientation. And over time, that has proved challenging to encourage people to disclose that information, partly because they think it will impact on whether or not they're successful in developing their careers with us. But for some people, they don't classify themselves in the same way as the categories that are set out as protected characteristics do. So, and the information's gathered by different organisations in different ways. So that's indicated by age. The categories we gather information on age and is not the same as the Office for National Statistics, for example. So there are challenges in having meaningful, comparable data. And one of the things highlighted in this report is to seek approval to develop a range of better benchmarking cohorts, because whilst we still use SIPFA information, you will see from the table in the main report that that information is very out of date. I wanted to give an example of why it is really important today that our workforce profile information is publicly available and celebrated. And that is very much in the range of, we currently in the middle of doing our graduate trainee assessments. Now, this isn't in the report. This is sort of hot off the press information, but I thought it served a purpose to talk about it today. So this year we had 444 applications for our graduate trainee programme, which is almost 200 more than we did last year. So that's a significant improvement. And of the people who applied, 75% of them, as you might expect, were in the 16 to 25 age bracket. But also in that group, there were nearly 20% of those came from a black or minority ethnic background, which is more than our current workforce figure. So that's a positive thing. And similarly, gender, we've always said that the gender balance in the county council, 73% plus female as opposed to men, other than at the most senior grades. And also the one factor that I would say remains almost static across all measures is disability. So of the 444 people who've applied, 6.61% of those have declared a disability. But what the people who've applied have told us is that things like our disability confidence status, our Stonewall Index rating, the fact that we are going for the Race at Work Charter, all these things matter to young people and make us a place they want to come and take their graduate traineeship with. So I think that, although not directly relevant to the reasons why we publish this information, I think it gives a very practical example of the impact that the information can have. Other things in terms of disclosure, the rates have gone up for ethnicity this year, but have dropped for disability. So that is of concern and something that we will pick up both in Corporate Equalities Group and indeed with the trade unions and self-managed groups, because what we would want to create is a climate where people feel comfortable and confident that they can disclose information about any protected characteristic, because that will help advance in terms of workforce planning, and that they can trust us to use that information appropriately and it never ever be used as a means of holding them back in their career progression. So there is a range of activity outlined in this. There are a range of action plans that underpin the information in this report, and they include things like the Disability Confident Action Plan, the Wider Equalities Action Plan, the Stonewall Action Plan. The next item on the agenda is another Equalities Supporting Black Workers Action Plan, and the work that's been chaired currently by Marge Toward in terms of the Workforce Recovery Group, with the strategy and an action plan coming along. The profile information informs a lot of the activity we want to take, and you will notice that there is an awful lot of things happening around the whole equalities agenda. And I think that's really important to mention, because it is something that is very important to our workforce. They want to come to work, they want to feel that they'll be treated fairly, they want to feel that they can develop their career with us, or indeed develop skills and knowledge that enable them to have a career in another place. And that's why we certainly looking at agendas for January, there is a raft of information coming around the equalities agenda there. So you may have many questions about the profile information. So I'll just say that the recommendations are to consider the actions set out in the report and any additional ones that you may identify, to approve the publication of the Workforce Information Report on the Council's public website as required by our public sector duty, and to agree to receive an annual update report setting out the situation as at April 2021. We always pick a date where we have the information from, and it is April of each year, and that report be included in future work programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jill, and it's really good to hear that people want to come and work for the county council, because the reputation as being a good employer, where you made those comments about disability confident, Stonewall, etc. So that's good to hear that we have a reputation that people want to come and join. So I'll ask any questions or comments. I've got I did have Councillor Wallace. I think he's now disappeared, or at least he's put his hand down again. Did you want to speak, Councillor Wallace, or no? No, right. Okay. Anybody else wish to make any comment or ask questions? I will take that silence then as no. So the recommendations include, well, the part 1, when it says set out in the report, that's in paragraph 26, those actions set out there. So all those in favour, please, of those recommendations. I'm assuming, and in usual fashion, it'd be easier to ask if there's anybody against or anybody wishes to abstain, and if nobody indicates in that fashion, I'm going to assume that everybody is in favour of those recommendations. Speak now or ever hold your peace, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for all the hard work being undertaken. Item 6 is the update on the actions to support the council's black workforce. And we're back to Jill again.
Here's me again, thank you. Members will recall at July's committee we brought a report identifying some activity around supporting our black employees, specifically in light of the resurgence of Black Lives Matter movement and indeed the situation with COVID. But it was deemed timely for a number of reasons. And over time, in conversations with the Black Workers Network, we have identified further actions. It was therefore deemed appropriate to set these out in an action plan, is our preferred style, so that we could be held to account and performance and progress measured in respect of this activity. So the action plan is in draft form at the moment and captures some of the things that we'd already agreed we would be doing. So one of the things that committee agreed last time was an expansion to a revised Equalities Officer role. And I'm pleased to say that that role is now out for advert. The advert closes on the 16th of October. Colleagues in the self-managed groups have been asked where they would like to see that advertised, and we've responded by giving it a very wide audience, hopefully, to attract suitably qualified candidates. That has a more senior grade than the previous post held, to give it a profile in the organisation that perhaps Equalities hasn't always held, and that was thought appropriate so that the successful candidate could take some of the initiatives forward, although they will not be solely responsible, because that is collective responsibility for all managers across the organisation. Other things that we agreed that we would do was to develop a range of activities. So at the moment we're developing some Q&A sessions with the Chief Executive, to start honest conversations, because what we've been struck in a number of the conversations we've had with Black colleagues is the impact that some of the events of this year and previously have had on them, and where it has made them think about their working lives and their home lives as well. So we want to generate a cross-council audience for those honest conversations, and that an idea under development. We also said as part of our commitment to Race at Work Charter that we would seek a champion from elected members, and I'm delighted to say that Councillor Gordon Wheeler has been approached and has accepted that role. So I'm sure you will be hearing from him in future on the cross equalities agenda. There are huge numbers of activities outlined in what is an ambitious and challenging programme, but some of the things that we've got to do. So I've just mentioned in the workforce profile the example of graduates. We've got an improved, nearly 20% of the applicants are from BME backgrounds. What we need then to do is to translate that through to and map it through to see how many of those are successful in getting through the assessment centre, getting through the interview and securing the traineeships with us. And that is not dissimilar to the work that we need to do in terms of workforce profile information. We can see of our current Black workforce, the majority of those rest in the professional or first line manager grades. So what action do we need to do to support them to have the same opportunity to move up the grades, to access the more senior appointments, bearing in mind we've had very limited recruitment and the opportunity to progress, and this would be the same in trying to balance any of the inequalities that we identify at the top of the organisation. We used to have 27 service directors. We've now got 10. There are limited opportunities for people to progress to the most senior level, but what we need to do is to ensure it's a level playing field for everybody. And so part of the thing I'm trialling with the Equalities Officer recruitment is involving the self-managed groups in the assessment process and asking, what might I have as a recruitment and selection tool that could be a barrier to somebody applying or progressing? And it's through that learning experience that hopefully we will remove any of the real or perceived barriers in terms of recruitment. So I hope members recognise that this is an ambitious and challenging programme, and as set out in the recommendations, that you are prepared to approve the actions identified in the draft Equalities Support for Black Employees Action Plan, and to receive an update on progress made toward meeting the identified actions at committee in January 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. And that certainly does look a pretty comprehensive action plan. Any questions or comments, please? Councillor Henry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Jill, thank you for this. I do welcome the update and the additional work that has been done so far to support the Council's Black workforce is pretty good. So thank you. I know the mandatory unconscious bias training for elected members is mentioned in the yellow pages of the report, but it's missing from the work programme. I think given that it will likely be a rolling programme offered over several days, it ought to be on the work programme. It might feel that it might be useful to provide an overview of the concepts underpinning unconscious bias training, I think that I believe that there is a certain apathy surrounding the training, which comes from a poor understanding of what is all about. I just wanted to clarify that this presents a real opportunity for all of us to engage in some self-reflection and possibly learn something about ourselves. We know that we are all products of our environments, and therefore it is sometimes impossible for any of us to be aware of any biases that we have developed, usually unconscious. But I am hoping to learn something about my own biases and believe that all of us can learn as well. So I'm really looking forward to engaging in this program. I thank the authority for providing the opportunity for all members to do the same. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, I certainly agree with you that you can't stop learning. Everybody is learning all the time. But I'm going to ask Marge Toward to respond to the comments you just made.
So just a bit of an update, Councillor Henry, on the unconscious bias training. So the corporate leadership team have now completed the unconscious bias training, and I was obviously part of that. And you're absolutely right about what you say about giving you the space and time to reflect on your own behaviours, and also to listen to other people reflecting on their behaviours, because you can learn something from that as well. So I actually thought it was a really useful piece of training to do. In terms of members, we have engaged the LGA Equality Lead is going to deliver our unconscious bias training for members, and the delay has been getting them to confirm some dates, which we've now got from them. So we're going out to members to offer members those dates, and we're going to try to do it. Obviously it'll be virtual, but it will be interactive, so people can have that reflection. I was a little bit concerned when we did it like that with CLT that we might find it difficult to engage in that way, but actually it was fine. The trainer was really skillful, and it was relatively easy to do that. So we'll be rolling that out to members in the not too distant future. It's not on the work programme for this committee, the members training, because it's on the work programme for the G&E committee, because members training goes there as part of that members communication and engagement programme. So that's why it's not on here.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Yep, that sounds good. Councillor Gordon Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Neil. Just to pick up from what Errol had said and from Marge's response, I'm delighted, like Errol is, and Marge is, clearly that the training is going to be rolled out to members. That's great news. What we don't want to see is it's rolled out to members and hardly any members dip into the training. I know it can't be mandatory. I understand that completely. But what I would like to see is the leaders of each political group encourage, persuade, cajole, whatever language you want to use, all their members to participate in this programme. Because Errol is absolutely correct. It's essential we all do just that. So you don't want to pay lip service to a programme that's being rolled out. We find less than half the members bother to actually engage with the programme. That's not acceptable. Thank you, Neil.
Can I answer? Yeah.
Thank you, Gordon. Marge, would you like to?
So you're clearly very experienced in undertaking our training, Councillor Wheeler, because you know what happens. So that is why we have made it mandatory, and that was agreed at full council. And to be fair, Councillor Rhodes, as the leader of the opposition, and the leader agreed that they would support that and go to do the training together to try and encourage that through the group structure, as you're rightly saying. So the expectation is that all members will do that training. So we'll see how we go with that, and I'll report back.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is a very important and very serious aspect as well. So you're quite right about training. It is sometimes very difficult, but I think this is one of those where everybody needs to participate. So let's hope that actually happens. Any other questions or comments? No, in which case we have the recommendations 1 and 2 at the bottom of page 69. Again, any against or abstaining? Doesn't look like it. So unless I hear to the contrary, I will take that as approval, and the motion is passed. Thank you very much indeed. And on to item 7, the staffing resources for the MacLeod judgment project. And I think I'm asking here Sarah Stevenson, who's miraculously appeared on the screen. Welcome. Would you like to present this report?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval from Personnel Committee for additional resources required within the Pension Administration team in order to comply with the Court of Appeal MacLeod judgment. Members are no doubt aware that the County Council is the administering authority for the Nottinghamshire Local Government Pension Scheme. The LGPS is a statutory scheme. It's a defined benefit scheme, but based since the 1st of April 2014 on career average evaluated earnings. But prior to this move in 2014, the LGPS was a final salary scheme. The background to the Court of Appeal MacLeod judgment is covered in the body of the report. But basically, it is a case that the courts identified and agreed with unjustified age discrimination in transitional protection arrangements as schemes moved from final salary to career average. The case was originally brought by the firefighters and judges and is now known as the MacLeod case. And these two groups were granted their claim by the Court of Appeal in 2018. In June 2019, the Supreme Court refused the government's application to apply. From an LGPS perspective, this relates to the treatment of two specific groups of members that are detailed at paragraph 7, and it relates to their age in coming up to retirement and their underpin protection elements, where potentially they would have been worse off in a career average-based scheme. This Court of Appeal judgment has numerous implications for members of the scheme, which are detailed within the report, and also impacts on employers within the scheme as well. However, there is a significant implication for the administration of the fund, and a significant piece of work will be required to actually fulfil our obligations under the Court of Appeal judgment. So there'll need to be a review of all pension processes to ensure that they're updated in line with the MacLeod underpin protections. The scheme will be required to collect additional data from scheme employers, which wasn't a requirement from the new scheme brought in April 2014. And it will also be required to undertake substantial retrospective calculations on all eligible pensioners and to potentially backdate pension adjustments where they're currently in payment. But also, the MacLeod judgment will require the fund to review members' entitlement to underpin protections that have come out as a result of this judgment. Early indications are for the Nottinghamshire Fund that we estimate that we'll need to review and recalculate approximately 24,000 members' records. Obviously, this is a substantial piece of work. There will need to be substantial communication to employers and members, and we wish to also engage with the employers to collect the additional data that's going to be required to undertake these retrospective calculations. It really is not possible to undertake this project within existing resources because this would have significant impact on current business as usual. This additional project also sits alongside the government's HMRC's project of guaranteed minimum pension reconciliation, which was the subject of an earlier report to Personnel Committee approximately 18 months ago. So what we're proposing is to seek approval from committee today to establish a temporary project manager post for a 2-year period. The funding of this post was approved by Pensions Committee, which is within the remit of the committee, last Thursday on the 10th of September, so funding has been agreed. Once the project manager is in place, that project manager will look at the additional resources that will be required to undertake the calculations and to fulfil our obligations under the MacLeod judgment. Our early thinking is that we would second some experienced staff from the pension administration team to the project alongside new recruits, but we would require backfill for these particular experienced staff. But that will be the subject of a further report to both Pensions Committee and Personnel Committee in due course. So the recommendations of this report are as set out at the end of the report, that members approve the establishment of a temporary post of project manager and B for a period of 2 years, following approval by Pensions Committee, which was granted on the 10th of September to fund this post, and agreed to receive a further report on the proposed resourcing requirements of a MacLeod project team. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I think the overriding paragraph there is paragraph 32, which says that the Pension Committee have already approved the funding. So you could argue this is sort of a bit of a technical exercise, really, to appoint these staff. And I understand that it's possible that a future pension review might result in them looking at funding posts direct themselves, so that it doesn't have to sort of go through this double hatting process. Yeah. Anyway, anybody have any comments or questions, please? Councillor Wallace.
Just an observation. I fully support what's been said. Fully support where we're going. In fact, we have the choice, given the Supreme Court rejected anything else. But having spent many, many years working for the Financial Services Authority and overseeing a lot of other reviews of different investments, etc., it tells me that this is a national, so it's not just Nottinghamshire area. This goes right across. This is a large bulk of work that has to be done. That most of these projects take years before they are resolved. And of course, the output of this is many members of the pension scheme will gather further monies, etc., etc. Some people who would have got money would die during the actual process. So while I fully support having a project manager brought in for 2 years, my questions would be, first of all, what deadlines have the courts laid down? Because they're not passive and just simply say, get on with it. Now we've decided on something. And the second is, what is the actual, or do we know what the financial implications are to the pension fund and the employers effectively, because they're the ones that will have to pay in additional funds to make up any additional gaps that the legislation has provided or the judgment decision has been provided. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wallace. I would have thought that last question was a question for the Pensions Committee rather than for this committee. But I'll ask Sarah to make some comments.
Well, it would be, but of course we'll be finding the money from our funds. From this committee, we'll be approving.
No, Councillor Wallace. No, that's the reason I made that comment.
Okay.
Paragraph 32. Is the funding comes from the Pension Committee. It doesn't come from us. So this is purely a technicality of the Personnel Committee making the appointment, whereas it's the Pensions Committee which is actually funding it. And that's the reason I made that comment about it potentially in the future. The Pensions Committee are going to review the arrangements so that we don't have this double hatting arrangement, that they will actually fund and make the appointments through the Pensions Committee themselves. So, as I say, this is a pure technicality, basically. We're just being asked to carry out a function that the Pensions Committee has already approved. Tell me if I'm wrong, Sarah.
That's absolutely correct. So if I come back to Councillor Wallace's questions, deadline dates, we're awaiting information from the Scheme Advisory Board for the Local Government Pension Scheme to come back to all LGPS funds regarding deadline dates in which to review, obviously, the calculations, etc. But to be able to do that, our first port of call is to go back to scheme employers and to collect the data that we will require to undertake those calculations again as well. We have another programme running within the Pension Administration Office, which is about transformation and change, and a large work stream there is about data collection and improvement. So what we're also doing is future-proofing our collection of data in case there are any other projects waiting in the wings to come forward, which the fund will need to respond to. We believe that obviously it'll be there will be an order in which the Scheme Advisory Board will advise the fund to address cases. That's likely to be pensioners who are already in receipt of their payment, and obviously then new pensions from a particular date coming into payment, and then looking at applying the underpin protections to active members. It is likely that we would start with the older categories of members before the younger categories, because they will be approaching retirement earlier. But that's why we need to review all of those processes as well. So we know this information will be coming to us, but we don't have a deadline yet when we'll receive it from the Scheme Advisory Board. Your second point was about the financial impacts and implications. That detail was presented to Pensions Committee at its meeting on the 10th of September, when a more general report about the McLeod judgment was brought to committee. I can certainly provide and circulate the detail of that at the end of this meeting to committee if you'd like me to do that. But obviously there is some balance here as well, but there will be processes put in place to have a look at what the implications are for employers, and therefore what the costs may be to funds, and work is being done by actuaries to have a look at what that means for future valuations of the funds as well. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Wallace, does that convince you?
You have my blessings.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm very pleased to hear that. That's very comforting. Thank you. Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? Are we all convinced? Jolly good. So, in moving to the recommendations, 1 and 2. Again, anybody against or any abstentions? In which case I will take that everybody is in favour, so that is passed. Thank you very much indeed. What happened then? Sorry, no. Right, so item 8 is regarding the work programme. I don't know, Marge, any updates at all or anything?
Yeah, so just the only thing I would update on this, but welcome any suggestions from members, would be Jules already talked about the update on the workforce profile report, so we need to add that in to it. It's not on here at the minute, I don't think. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything else unless you've got any other suggestions for things we need to add in. Right,
thank you. Any other comments at all? Questions? No. And for hopefully the final time this afternoon, anybody against or abstaining? No. So assumed everybody in favour, so that motion is passed. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I believe that we lost Councillor Sheila Place a few minutes ago. I think her connection went down, which is a bit unfortunate. But I think we've managed to keep going. I'll just mention one irony, actually, of us losing the connections, because I was in an LGA board meeting yesterday where we had the Chief Executive of Broadband UK giving us a presentation. Yes, you've guessed it. His broadband connection went down. And his deputy director had to take over, and he came back again about 10 minutes later. So yes, the irony was not lost, and we had some considerable jesting over that. So we've told him in no uncertain terms that the service needs to improve across the country pretty damn quickly. Anyway. That completes the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance, and thank you for bearing with us in a few odd connection problems here and there. Let's hope things improve. But that's the end of the agenda, and I'll declare the meeting closed and hope everybody stays safe and well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.